So the last time that I did the testimony, it was 25 minutes long. And it occurred to me that that's really an unrealistic expectation in this day and age. So what I thought I would do is split my story up into 3 or 4 parts. And that way you can listen as you have time. The reason that I want to share my testimony with you is because it is a story of hope. Despite having a very harsh upbringing as a Jehovah's Witness and also being a victim of abuse, every kind of abuse that a person can have. So that's why I wanted to talk with you and share with you. And I'm just going to start at the beginning because that's the easiest way to do it. So my mother was divorced when I was 3 years old and remarried very quickly after that. She remarried about a year later. So my stepfather came into my life when I was about 4 years old. And to say that my mother and my stepfather were strict is somewhat of an understatement. They were very rigid. An example is I had to call adults Mr. and Mrs. I could not call adults by their first name. I had to say yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. And they were not military. That was just how strict they were. So the reason that I'm mentioning how strict they were is because that was before they became Jehovah's Witnesses. Then at the age of 6, my mother and stepfather began to study with Jehovah's Witnesses and became much more rigid. Because Jehovah's Witnesses have a lot of rules as it is. And so they took their rules and it was compounded by the JW rules. And so my upbringing was very, very rigid and did not have grace, did not have unconditional love and acceptance. It was very performance driven. Now, they became Jehovah's Witnesses, became baptized very quickly after they started studying. And when they became Jehovah's Witnesses, made a fair amount of money. My stepfather had a private pilot's license. We went flying to San Diego on the weekends. We had a big house. And all of that changed after they became witnesses because it was decided that Chuck would go into the full-time ministry, or pioneering, as it was called. And pioneering is just everything from knocking on doors to calling on businesses, to having Bible studies, to making what was called return visits to people that had expressed a interest. And so there was a lot of sacrifices that we made so that Chuck could go into the full-time ministry. And what is important to note is that I was excited about those sacrifices. I fell in love with Jehovah when I was 6. He was amazing to me in every way possible. And so Mom and Chuck wanted to serve him, and I wanted to serve him with them. So since field service was such a big focus, I became very active in the field ministry with them when I wasn't in school. Because I loved Jehovah so much, I got baptized at the young age of 12. That was considered pretty young for a Jehovah's Witness to get baptized. And I immediately started what was called temporary pioneering, which is basically signing up on a month-to-month basis instead of a yearly basis for regular pioneering. And so loved being out in service, loved talking about Jehovah. It was very easy for me to start talking about him. Very quickly after meeting you, I would bring him up somehow, bring up being a Jehovah's Witness somehow. And it was very natural for me because I loved him so much. And so the first couple of years after I was baptized were pretty uneventful. They were just chock full of being in the ministry. So basically I went to school, and when I got out of school I would oftentimes go with Mom and my stepfather into field service, or go on return visits. They would a lot of times happen later in the day, or Bible studies after people got home from work. And so that was my life until I was 14. And 14 was a very pivotal year for me because Mom and Chuck wanted to go where there was a need for more witnesses to be out in field service. We were in Southern California at the time, and the territory was covered frequently that was assigned to the congregation. And so Mom and Chuck decided to move us to Kingsport, Tennessee. And it was in Kingsport, Tennessee that my life drastically changed. And so that's what I wanted to share with you in this first segment. The next segment that I'm going to do is going to span the next 7 years of my life. It was when I was in Tennessee that my abuse started, and I'm going to share that with you up until through my first year of marriage, when we left Tennessee to move back to Southern California. So that is what I'll be sharing with you next time, and I really appreciate your time and your attention, and I hope that the rest of your day is blessed.